hopefully nobody in the room will leave tonight not having a couple of options under your belt for how to put the deal together. The key to all of this is just being creative and being resourceful. You don't have to think about what resources that you have. You need to think about who has the resources I need to get the deal done, and then figure out how to connect with that person or people and put the deal together. If I told you some of the crazy stuff that happens, I don't know if you'd even believe it, but it's like, I'll just use an example for one that Brandon lent on recently. We need to put a deal together in like 2 weeks. I think it was a week and a half, and we needed 150 grand. And Brandon came through on that. But had I not had the contacts from this group and known like who to turn to on the deal and what types of deals that would be presentable to somebody like him, that option wouldn't have been there, and the deal probably wouldn't happen. But when these opportunities hit, you need to be able to be prepared to put the deals together. So you don't want to wait until you have a deal on your plate that you're at risk of losing to put it together. Although I will tell you that those are the times when you get the most resourceful, is when you're like, oh shit, this deal's gonna die unless I can figure this out. And then you figure it out, and the next time it's not as big of a problem. But you guys are all here this evening to be able to figure that stuff out, in advance, and be able to put together deals and not lose deals to your competition. So the first type of financing we'll talk about is probably the one that everybody in the room is familiar with, probably the most traditional type of financing, which is going to a bank, right? So if you go to a bank, how many people have gotten loans from a bank before? It's pretty common. Most of the time when people think about financing and think about lending, you're thinking about going to a bank. This does stifle a lot of people's thinking when it comes to real estate investing, because the thought is a lot of the stuff that goes with bank financing, they're going to be focused on your credit score. You're going to have to put some amount of money into the deal, and you're probably, at least initially, going to have some W-2 income in order for them to consider you. And then you've probably heard these stats out there on like YouTube videos and different things about how many residential loans you can get from a bank. I don't know what the number is, like 5, 7. Everyone gets all bent out of shape about that. It's really not that important, because you're probably not going to do that many loans personally anyway. Once you get into it, you'll probably get 1 or 2, and then you'll be setting the LLC up, and you'll be on to doing some different stuff, which I'm going to talk about tonight as well. But yeah, bank financing, it's going to be slow. You're probably going to get pretty good rates, but you're going to have to bring your own money, and you're going to have to go under the microscope and have them scrutinize your finances, your tax returns, your bank statements, your birth certificate, your social security card, whatever they feel like they want to look at. But you got to keep in mind, I always run into this with residential clients. They're like, I can't believe the bank is asking for all of this stuff. It's like, well, they're lending you 97% of the money. Like, you have like no risk. Now, it's a little bit different story as an investor, but all the risk is the bank. So they're going to make sure that the risk is essentially as little as possible if they're lending you the money. Plus, they're lending it for like some obscenely low rate at the time. And bank financing is probably going to be your cheapest option as far as an interest rate is concerned. But you're going to have to probably bring the most down payment money, and you're going to have to be bankable. That's not the case for everybody. But if you are, that's an asset, and that's something that you should keep in mind. And if you have time in the deal to make that work, it's a good option. Private money. So this is another option, and I have a whole slide on private money, but basically this is a funding source that is just a regular person, for lack of a better term. Somebody that you know or somebody that you know knows that has money that will lend it to you at a reasonable rate if it's protected and safe. And then hard money, these are people that are in the professional business of lending money. They're not just a regular person. They are regular people, but they lend money and they do it as a business. So they're going to be charging a fee for that, and they're going to be charging a higher interest rate than somebody that you might borrow money from that's just, hey, I'm going to lend money to you because I'm your uncle or something, and I want to see you do well in real estate, and they'll put a deal together. And then the other thing we're going to talk about this evening is seller financing. Always ask. This is an opportunity for you to get into deals without going to a bank, without going to somebody to borrow money, or without going to a hard money lender. And I say always ask, but I'm going to qualify that a little bit later because people are asking all the time, and it's like, all right, no. Next question. But we'll get into that. And then syndications, you've probably heard a lot about this, or maybe not. This is a form of pooling money for an investment. There's a lot of regulations involved in it. Don't do it if you're new. Even if you're seasoned, there's a lot of regulations involved in it. So you need to link up with a good attorney that understands SEC exemptions and things like that before you're ready to get involved in something like that. And it's not really practical for deals that are under $1 million anyway. So just know that that's out there, and then that's a way. Most of the type of people that invest in these deals are either somebody that found the deal or somebody that meets the criteria of an accredited investor. And if you don't know what that is, don't mess with it. Just work on becoming an accredited investor. So bank financing, talked a little bit about this up front, but we're going to talk in a little bit more detail here. In bank financing, your income is extremely important. They're basically looking at you as the security for the loan. So you should have W-2 income. If your income's not a W-2, you're going to have more hoops to jump through than someone who does have a W-2. They're going to look at your credit, so that'll be very important. And they're going to look at what's the collateral, what are they lending on, what's the value of the collateral. They're not necessarily looking at the collateral for the income, they're looking at you for the income. They're just looking to make sure that the collateral, the real estate, is worth what they're lending the money for. And as I mentioned, you're going to have a ton of documentation, and you're going to have financial statements if we'll talk about different things related to that. And there's a difference between residential and commercial lending. I'm going to talk about the differences here. So residential, which is probably how most of you guys are going to get started, it's on the traditional side of the bank. So you might see a regular mortgage broker, you might deal with a regular lender like you would if you're buying a home, like a regular local bank's lending department. Like I said, mortgage brokers, people that deal with loans for people that are trying to live in a house. So those folks can write loans for up to 4 units, still considered residential. Those loans are going to be in your personal name if you're going to be dealing with that person at the bank or with that mortgage broker. And as I mentioned, they're going to be looking at your personal income. Does this person make enough money to pay the loan if something happens? The other thing is, when you're getting started, they're not going to, a lot of times, count income from your rentals because they're not looking at you as a professional landlord yet. So they're going to assume that your tenants move out and you make no money, can you still pay the mortgage? They want to make sure it's getting paid. And your credit, very important. They're going to focus on the strength of the borrower in residential lending, which is why the documentation is so stringent, because they want to know where it seems like every dollar you spend is going. And when they're evaluating the property, they're going to look at comps, comparable sales for the property. If you're buying an $80,000 property, they want to make sure that there's other properties that have sold that are worth $80,000 and your property's not worth $50,000. Now, on the commercial side of the bank, and this is where most of you guys are going to get to if you're not there already. So anything 5 unit and up, automatically the regular residential guys aren't going to be able to do that. They're going to put you over, even if the property's fully residential, it's all apartment units, they're going to put you over to the commercial lenders at the bank. Or if you have a single family house, and it might be a 1 to 4, but it's in an LLC, it's not in your personal name, you're still going to be dealing with the commercial side. This becomes an issue for a lot of people that are getting started when everyone's like, oh, form an LLC, get your LLC going, and the first couple properties you want to buy is a 2 unit, single family, 3 unit. Well, commercial lending departments don't really like to deal with a $60,000 loan on a single family house in the city, so it can be tough to get that type of financing. Now, if that was in your personal name, you can just get a regular residential loan on it, no problem. But if it's as soon as it's in an LLC, now you got to get a commercial loan, and a lot of times they have minimums on the types of loans that they like to write. With the commercial lending, they're more focused on the property's income itself than your income, because they're looking at the property to pay the loan back, not you, which can be a big benefit if you're not a high income earner or if you don't have a W-2. You know, you can buy this type of real estate and they're going to be looking at the performance of the property. The downside of that is if you're trying to buy a property that's underperforming or not performing, that can cause issues. So commercial lending might not be an option if the property is beat up or if it's got a lot of vacancy or something like that. Excuse me. So NOI is important in commercial. That's net operating income. So they're going to look at the basically the cash flow of the building. So property strength versus borrower strength when you're going on the commercial side versus residential side. Anybody have any questions about bank financing? Go ahead.
Is the LLC thing with the commercial, like when we use single family homes, we're an LLC, we just put it into the LLC thinking, okay, but we didn't have to personally guarantee it. So is that, I mean, they didn't tell us we were going commercial, we did residential with S&T Bank that did it for us. Is that kind of something?
What, personal guarantees?
Well, I just, that didn't quite apply what you were saying in our case, so I didn't know if that would mean a new.
Well, with S&T, you probably were dealing with a commercial lender. You think it was a regular residential loan originator?
As far as I know, it was, yeah.
They had to hold that in-house then.
Okay.
They had to hold it in-house.
All right. Yeah, because that's usually unusual. Most of the loans I've gotten through S&T were commercial. I didn't know how much residential lending that they do.
I mean, now this has been, that was a couple of years ago when we first started with those guys. But
Okay.
that's why I just wanted to see if that was a change or.
This is what's typical. You know, now banks can do different things at their discretion, but typically, like Darren was alluding to, a lot of these residential lenders aren't keeping residential mortgages on their books, they're selling them. So like York Traditions, if they're writing a regular home loan for a owner-occupant, they're 9 times out of 10 selling that loan right away. So that's why the origination is so cumbersome, because they got to get everything packaged up so that it can be sold easily.
Yeah.
But if they're planning to keep the loan long term, they don't have to go through that kind of hoops. They still have to meet requirements for lending, but they might not have to have 3 years of tax returns and all this stuff.
I know they required a lot, I mean, we're both W-2, regular
Right.
daytime job folks, so they required the tax returns and W-2s and all
Yeah.
that stuff. But they said they did put them in our LLC with us as the personal, I mean, they show up on our credit reports, those,
Oh, really?
yeah.
Okay.
There's one, yeah.
That's not, but what you're doing is you're really alone is in the LLC, but it's in your name, really.
Yeah.
It's on your credit report. One of the reasons of doing an LLC is so it's not on your credit report.
Okay.
One other thing, Dave, when you're doing commercial, a very important feature is experience.
You mean for the borrower?
Yep.
Right, that's true. Yeah, it's a lot easier, like when you send an REO sheet over with all your stuff, it just seems like stuff gets underwritten faster.
So is there years of experience that is preferred? I mean, is it better if you got 5 or 10 or?
Well, it depends what you're doing, what you're going for. If you're looking for, somebody wants to start off with a 5 or 6 year project, if you don't have the experience in financing, they're gonna be very hesitant because you don't have the experience to take care of it. So most of the time, ask somebody to get 1 or 2 single family or duplex and get some experience before you start jumping into 5. Don't stay in the single family, but experience in what you're doing.
Yeah, banks don't wanna be your guinea pig.
No.
They don't wanna be lending you money to try something for the first time.
I got a quick question
Go
then.
ahead.
So, and this will, I guess, relate to private money as well. So for someone who has just like a little bit of experience, what is the best way, like, are you creating like a virtual portfolio of like, if I'm doing a BRRRR, here's like my results and like there's a little bit of forth, here are the numbers, cash flow?
Harry has a good presentation on this about a credibility kit, but the bottom line is before and after photos, experience, if you've done anything in real estate at all, or if you're partnering with somebody who has that experience, if you're going to a traditional lender. Otherwise, you kind of got to find someone who's lending, and we'll get into this. Actually, we'll go into it right now. So for private money, this is probably one of the best places to get money when you're new. And this is typically from somebody who is a relative or relationship of yours. Can be anybody out there that has money. And they don't have to have a lot of it. I think my first deal, I borrowed like 5 or 10 grand, like 15 grand from my grandmother. And then I kept going to her. I would pay her back and then borrow more money on deals. And then at one point in time, I was like, hey, I need to borrow money for a deal. And she's like, oh, how much do you need? And I'm like, 50. And she's like, oh, I don't think I'm your person. So I had to move away from her after that. But that's a good place to get started because they're lending on you, not the project. So that they know you, they want to see you be successful. The private lenders, their biggest concern is, am I going to get my money back? Like, they're not really that concerned about the interest rate, and don't even bring up points. If you do, you're basically screwing yourself because they don't have any idea about points. So don't say anything to them about it. Don't ruin it for the next person that comes along to borrow money. Yeah. So you just want to give them an interest rate that they're impressed with and make sure that they get their money back. So you need to have a plan for how they're going to get their money back. Not like I buy this property, I'm going to flip it and resell it. Or I'm going to buy the property, I'm going to refinance it once it's stabilized and get the money back. You need to have a plan. You can't get into it like, well, I don't really know, especially when you're new. Like, you can have other options later, but, get these people their money back. Like I said, they're investing in you, not the project. It's your responsibility to protect them. They might not ask for things like a first position mortgage, but you really should give that to them. You should name them as an additional insured on your insurance policy. And there's various other things that you can do to protect them. but you don't want to put your lender at risk. You know, if you lose money on a deal, the lender should still get their money back. You're going to take the hit on that because you want to make sure that you, as you're developing these relationships, that you can always go back to those people. Terms are fully negotiable. It's whatever you and the private lender can work out. And there's a lot of room here for creativity, but don't get too creative. You're not trying to take advantage of people here. This is somebody that you care about and they care about you enough to lend you money. So you need to make sure that you're giving them a good return too. Like if you know the going rate's 7%, don't offer them 5%. You know, offer them something that's fair, but you don't have to pay them as much as you would pay to a hard money person. So an important part about this is a lot of people think, oh, private money, I have to go to somebody that's really wealthy or has a ton of money. There's a lot of folks around, pretty much anybody that's within 10 to 15 years of retirement, and some people that aren't, have retirement accounts or self-directed IRAs where they have the ability to borrow money or lend money from. Those are options. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these options for people with private money here. So self-directed IRAs, 401ks, there's custodians that specialize in doing this, and we'll probably have one of them in to speak. We've had people in to speak in the past. Kevin's spoken about it in the past. But there's basically not a Vanguard, but that's just an example. Places where retirement money is kept. There's ones like that specialize in letting people borrow the money and use it for real estate or lend it right out for real estate. It's easiest if you can have somebody transfer money they have in a regular, like a Vanguard or a Fidelity, into one of those and then lend on your deal versus trying to have them borrow it from their 401k and lend it, because there's fees and interest and stuff associated with borrowing it. Whereas if it's in one of those vehicles, it's a little bit easier. But it doesn't always work out that way, depending on where the money is, when you need it, who's in the deal. You just have to make sure if you're doing it, you make it worth people's while. If they're going to be selling stuff and converting to cash or something, you know, it's better if they just have it in one of those vehicles already. The other place, which is a good option, is if you know anybody that has any whole life insurance, or if you yourself have any that has a cash value. I used to not be super excited about this when rates were 3.25% and 4%, and the insurance interest rate was like 5% or 5.5%. But now it's like the cheapest money you can get anywhere is borrowing from an insurance policy. You can't get a home equity loan rate as cheap as you can borrow from a whole life insurance policy. So if you know anyone that has whole life insurance that has a cash value, that's a place that money can be borrowed pretty cheaply. And that person can make a spread. You know, they can borrow the money themselves, lend it to you at a spread, and still be giving you a pretty good deal and making some money themselves. The other place is home equity loans or lines of credit against various things or houses. So if you have a home that has some equity in, you can get a home equity loan and use that for some of your deals. Important thing that I think for people to know, everyone's like, oh, I'm getting a home equity loan, I'm risking my home. You've really taken the equity that's in your house, moved it out of this piece of real estate into another piece of real estate, and the new piece of real estate is free and clear, ideally. So you still have the same amount of equity, if not more, really. I mean, because hopefully you didn't just buy a piece of property that you paid exactly what it's worth. Hopefully it's worth more than you paid for it, or you're gonna fix it up and increase the value of it. And then when that's sold, you can put that money back on your home equity loan. But it gives you, if you're not taking advantage of that, your equity in your house is just sitting there collecting dust. You know, it's not doing anything for you. So those are good, fast places to get access to money, either from a private lender or from yourself. Anybody have questions about these things before we move on? Oh man, this is probably the most, go ahead.
Do you know who does self-directed 401ks?
So Equity Trust does some. They're one of the most popular custodians. There's quite a few others. What ones do you deal with, Kevin?
Solo401k.com is awesome. And the nice thing about Solo 401k is you can be your own trustee, so you don't have to use a custodian. You are the custodian, so you almost have checkbook, well, you do, you have checkbook access to your 401k. So it blows the self-directed IRAs out of the water. They're the best way to go.
So, some of that checkbook stuff scares the shit out of me, but Kevin loves the hell out of it.
Where's he going?
And there's a comp plan in Hamburg, Pennsylvania.
Gamma plan?
Yeah, Carl Fisher.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of them too. You do need to be cognizant if, what I'm talking about for the purpose of this evening is getting money from other people. If you have a vehicle set up like that, any of your own retirement accounts, you can't really use that. I won't say you can't, I know that there's options, but you can't just forget about using that for your own deals unless you're borrowing against it and using that. Like if you have a self-directed, that's for you lending money to other people or investing in other deals that are not your deal. But you can have other people invest in your deals. That's totally kosher. You just have to, there's some rules about it. So ask, if you think that that's something that you might like to do, come ask me or ask Kevin, like, hey, what, is this something that's feasible? Don't just go out there Wild West slinging money out of your Roth or your Solo 401. Okay. Hard money. So for those of you without a rich uncle, this is your option. So you don't have to know somebody that has money or has money in a retirement account in order to get money for your deals. There's folks that have a business doing this, and they'd be glad to finance your deal if in fact it is a deal. So that's the key part, is usually these people know what they're doing, and if they look at your deal and they say, I don't want to lend on it, it's usually because what you think is a deal is not really a deal. Which I find to be the most comforting thing, if there is such a thing that's comforting, is working with a hard money lender. But that is the most valuable part, is you get a second set of eyes on your deal, and you get to have something looked at in a way that you may or may not have thought of it. So these lenders are people who are in the business of lending money. Or more than likely they're in real estate too, because they are familiar with real estate, and that's why they are willing to lend money on real estate deals. I always appreciate, and people have seen Shark Tank, right? Everybody in the room has probably seen Shark Tank. I like watching Shark Tank, and you look at the hoops that these guys are going through and all the stuff that they build and the sales, and they're like, we're looking for $200,000 or something. It's usually some amount of money like that. And they're raising it, and they're selling a piece of their company that they've been working on for 4 or 5 years. And it's like, when you go to a hard money lender and you're like, I need $150,000 or $200,000, they're like, okay, what's the deal? And the presentation is significantly shorter than what you see on Shark Tank. And that's because we're in the real estate business, which I think is the best business, because you have an asset there that has value. It isn't about you or your business or your business plan or how much you're going to sell or like how many people are going to buy this. It has value because it's a piece of real estate and it just is worth what it's worth. So it's much easier, in my opinion, to get the money than you might otherwise experience with other things that you're trying to raise money for. Kind of got off on a tangent there, but with hard money lender, they're going to dictate the terms. It's not like a private lender where you negotiate terms. Typically, they might be negotiable depending on your experience and your history with that lender. But typically, they're going to tell you, here's what my standard terms are. I charge this many points, such and such interest rate, what have you. And a lot of times they'll be using their own documentation, and they might direct what title company you're going to close at to make sure that they're protected. So that's all normal stuff when you're borrowing hard money. Like I said, terms may vary with your experience, also with the amount of money that you're borrowing. You might get different terms borrowing 60 grand than you will 250. They're lending on the project, so they don't want to take deals back, so they're basically looking at the viability of the project when they're lending the money. But they're also not afraid to do that because they're familiar with what the property's worth typically. I already went over this. So when you hear them saying about points that they charge, that's commensurate with like an origination fee at a bank. So don't get, a lot of times people think banks are so great, they're like, oh, well, they're giving me such and such interest rate and they're giving me these great terms. Well, when you add their origination fee, the appraisal, and other fees that they have, and you look at what the prepayment penalties are, sometimes you're better off going to a hard money lender or a private lender than you are with a bank in the first place. So there's a couple types of, or at least I put it this, as two types of hard money lending. There's local people, and then there's institutional folks. So local hard money lenders, they're an individual or a small business. The terms are potentially flexible, like you can negotiate with them and come up with something that makes sense for both of you. And the underwriting is simple because they're familiar with the market, familiar with the properties, and they know what they're dealing with. But typically they lend in the local area, so you're not going to deal with a local hard money lender and say, hey, I want to buy some deal in South Carolina. They might do it, but there's probably a 90% chance they're not going to lend outside of the market that they're familiar with. If you use an institutional company, they're typically a fund or a bigger company. Their terms are going to be standard. There's not really going to be any negotiation. They're going to tell you what the loan to value is. They're going to tell you what the points are. They're going to tell you what the interest rate is. And the underwriting is going to be a lot more thorough. They don't know you or have a relationship with you, and they're not necessarily operating in your market. So they have to go through a process to make sure that they know what these properties are worth and that they know that you're going to pay them back. So, and they might not lend you as much money on the deal because they need a little bit more security because there's uncertainty associated with lending in an area that's not your own backyard. And they may be nationwide. So I'm going to have, let's start with local. Brandon, is there anything you would want to say about hard money lending, or does anybody have any questions about hard money lending from a local lender's perspective? Would you guys want to field it? Anybody have questions about that? Jeez. Nobody needs money in this room? Go ahead.
Is that, they, send them the exact fee?
Yeah, how do you collect, Brandon? Yeah, with that. Right.
It's pretty simple, I mean, it's just, there's terms in the mortgage and, you can mail a payment in, or you come to our office and you drop the payment off, pretty simple. We're working on an online piece that, will be able to do everything, online. And that should hopefully be done, mid-year here. So, but, it's pretty simple, but everybody works different, some guys want to, go at dinner and collect it, it all depends on the individual, who you're borrowing from. If it's a local hard money guy, but I'd rather just go and, you pay your bills and, see you want to see it, kind of deal.
Yeah, you can't eat that much dinner, right?
I'd be there every night, then some.
Right. It's a good process though. Like if you're looking for hard money, you want to deal with somebody local. I've had good experiences with Brandon. I couldn't say enough good things about him for being able to be flexible with deals and be creative with deals. It's a big benefit. Go ahead.
Are you typically doing like 6 or 12 month? Or
It
is it?
depends on the deal, I mean, usually if it's a flip, it's gonna be like a 6-month term with like an extension built in. If it's something that you're gonna do as a rental, it'd be usually 1 year, so if you kind of get to a bank, you kind of sign it and write it and renovate or do whatever you're gonna do. We've went to a lot of people in this room, and, multiple times. I try to make it very, we try to make it as easy as it can be. I don't usually turn down most deals from guys, just depending on what the circumstance is and, who it is and what it is and, we really know underwriting criteria. And if I know the property or, I know what it is, or chances are we know the deal, or sometimes we even get involved in helping the investor through the renovation process or the actual negotiation of the deal. We've done that several times, we actually help negotiate the deal for the person, so we know the business, so we know all aspects of it, from the roof down to the, getting to the bank, so, nothing different than anything.
Thank you.
Somebody else had a question?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what do typical rates look like, in that term, and like how much of your own money do they typically ask for in a deal?
I didn't hear it.
Oh, he said like, how much money do you expect like a borrower to bring of their own in a deal?
We will typically do 100% of your purchase price. So if you put a contract for $85,000, we'll finance 100% of that $85,000. If, the property, we know the value there, and we're comfortable with the person that's gonna do the rehab. That it's gonna happen, or we know that person's competent to get to the bank. But typically, we'll points up front, and, and then the interest rate depends on the deal, like you said, it depends on if it's 60 grand or 250 grand, is gonna determine, what your rate's gonna be and what your point structure's gonna look like, if it's a smaller deal, there's a big return, well, guess what, I want a piece of the action too. I want more points and a little more interest because I know it's a juicy deal for you. I know it's gonna help to get there. If it's just a mediocre deal, and it is what it is, and it's just gonna be, kind of a standard rate term, with some points up front and make it easy for you. It just depends on what the deal is and, what it is. So we blend in Ocean City, we blend in, we blend in Georgia already, and we've done a bunch of deals in different places, so.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely good. Everybody should have a hard money lender on speed dial. If the speed dial, is that a thing anymore? And then I wanted to let Sean and Joe talk a little bit about what hard money looks like on an institutional standpoint. So it's a little bit different dealing with a professional company. I'm not saying like it is everyone's professional, they're doing it, but like when you're dealing with a company, it's not like calling up Brand and say, hey, I have a 6 unit on such and such. What do you think about it? I'm looking to borrow a set. He knows right where it's at, what he thinks it's worth. I don't have to justify it. Right. Right.
And they're gonna look at the deal and they're gonna, they're ready to pour it and almost treat it as if it's a bank deal, they're just a little more ballsy to take the risk. So, what a bank would do.
So did you guys want to?
Whatever I say, he's gonna just undercut me and say.
He's cheaper.
No, come on.
Oh, hey guys.
This is still like a month ago.
Right. Here's my recommendation. Somebody told me this. I think it might have been Ron, but you can't have too many banks. So I think the same goes with any lenders. If you have one or two options, you have no options. So you need to make sure that you have as many options as possible. Talk to these folks, see what they have to offer, take them to lunch, take them to coffee, learn what their programs are so you'll know when something comes up who would be a good fit for what and what your options are. And plus, send them your stuff in advance, your PFS, your REO sheet, your tax returns, so they have your stuff underwritten, and it's going to really expedite the process because they are going to need that stuff, and that's totally normal when dealing with banks or institutional money that they're going to ask you for those types of things.
You want me to, I'll run through it real quick.
Sure.
So my name's Sean King with Icon Cities. We're based out of Philadelphia, but I would say we're a good marriage between a local lender and an institutional lender. So we are local. I grew up here in West York. One of our managing principals is also from Harrisburg. So we're local to the market and we know it well. But at the same time, we also do lend nationwide. So we have boots on the ground, basically from here all the way down the coast. And I always say it's the smile of America. So it's like East Coast, Dallas, California, Arizona, everything in between as well. On the other side of things, though, we are also investors. I've been investing since 2016. Some of the other managing principals have been doing it a lot longer than me, have 3 or 4 doors. One of the things, we actually have hats that say all lenders suck. Because we get, it's not a sexy business. At the same time, obviously, you should have multiple options, just like you said. But sometimes it's like pulling teeth, and we get that. I've had to borrow from lenders myself, so I understand the pain points, and our job is to try and negate those pain points as much as possible, and to try and help you grow your business, looking for serious investors who are looking to grow and scale with us. And the type of products that we do, very similar to Joe and most others. We're focused on fix and flip. We're also doing fix and holds. We're doing a lot of ground up new construction. We're seeing a lot of people actually moving from fix and flip into the ground up new construction, which we're happy to do with them and help them and walk them down that path. And then on the back end, we're also going to do 30-year fixed rates and cash out refinances. So the one thing that I would say is the same thing, is have that conversation, right? Like there are a million different ways to skin a cat. And the best time to have a conversation about financing was yesterday. So you should have relationships with all of us who are saying we do hard money. I'm a bank, I'm a private lender. Build a relationship because you don't know when it's going to come in handy and who's going to fit what. And I'll just leave you with, I think, 3 questions to ask any lender is 1, where do you get your capital from? So is it private money? Do you have a debt fund, as you said? Is it a diversified capital stack where you have private equity and a debt fund? There are a million different ways that they keep doing it. It's a great question to find out. Delve under the hood a little bit. Secondly is, are you a direct lender or are you a broker? A great thing to delineate about. And then thirdly is, what do you lend on? So, like I just said, Some people are only gonna do fix and flips. Some people are only gonna do, buy and hold, or only, 30-year fix. Find out beforehand so you know when you have a deal, here's who I should be talking to. This is their buy box, and I should have this conversation with them. So that being said, let me know if you have any questions, and look forward to speaking with all of you and building a relationship.
Sounds good. Well, and one of the important things Sean just said about knowing what your lender lends on to, that's important for those guys and for the banks. Like, okay, I'm buying this property. It's mixed use. How much of the income is commercial versus residential? That's going to make a big deal to banks in terms of loan to value, rate, how they're going to value the property too. That's stuff I'm just starting to appreciate lately as well. We're getting into some mixed use things, and we're in an environment right now where anything that's commercial is nuclear right now. So people don't want to, not commercial lending, but like commercial space. So it's very good to have a couple lenders in your back pocket that's like, oh, we have no issue with commercial, so that you can put those types of things together. Go ahead, Jeff.
Don't listen to anything he says.
That's almost impossible with Jeff.
They're letting the pretty faces, they haven't been through a lot, so anything like that, you gotta concern yourself. Have you been through a lot or not? So when you had him in 2008, when he was in grammar school, and I was actually in the field. I'm sorry. He's got a little thing going on before we run into each other. So,
These North Jersey guys are tough.
You have a lot of real estate and not a lot of money. Okay, so the hedge funds came together and said, listen, Wall Street is bloated, it's overpriced, let's move some of our money into an unregulated space to make money long term. And they came together, and over the past 12 to 15 years post 2000 mortgage crash, there's now more money than these. And you're going to keep seeing that right now, because what's happening is the institutional buyers, the Vanguards, the State Streets, the Blackstones, the BlackRock. I've worked with Blackstone, I'm very familiar with, and I've worked with different sources with BlackRock. They're not buying single-family homes. The media wants you to think that. That's not the case. The case is they're building complexes. All the booms that are going up there, multi-family developments, townhome communities, build to rent BTR. That's all institutional money. That's your competition. So right now you're looking at slim pickings. You have a lot of conversions of office space coming into the residential space right now. Malls are getting chopped up in half. You have to be very concerned where all migration rental reports are moving to, which are the Midwest. So down along the East Coast, it's turning into a C market in most suburban, urban settings. Section 8 is now better than some of the market rents in almost every market throughout the East Coast. So you just have to better understand your debt service coverage ratio. You have to be honest and transparent with your lender. We don't care about tax returns. We don't care about baselines, and 99s. We care about cash in the bank or liquid assets availability, whether it's self-directed IRA, retirement, lines of credit. That's why I offer lines of credit as well. Savings checking. I want to know what the debt service of the property is. I want to know what you bought it for. I want to know what you put into it. We don't care about seasoning because we're not a bank. We go back to our hedge fund mentality. Again, we don't care about the things like a bank. We're not regulated like that. So go to a traditional lender. They're going to have restrictions if they offer non-QM because they're a regulated, environment. With what we do, it's non-QM. If you have a frank discussion without saying you're a genius over an email, have a call with us instead of texting us like you're on Instagram. Okay? And we have a conversation. Oh, you have a favorite appraiser. That's cool. Why don't we sign up an AMC that they're under? Or have them sign up for our AMC and make a bid on your appraisal. Okay? Or, wait a minute. The people that are in your LLC, how's it structured right now? Well, the guy that has a 660 credit score is the majority owner. You need to change all that around. And you got to put somebody with a 720 credit score, the 740 credit score. So if somebody has a 660 credit score, it's definitely going to impact it comparatively to a 740 score. Okay, so you have a deeper discussion about your operating agreement and the LLC structuring of that property with those borrowers in that transaction. Okay? You have to have a very specific conversation. So before you submit anything, and they can't unsee something. Because once an underwriter sees something, they can't unsee it. Okay, so you have to make sure that you have a proper discussion with your account executives to make sure you're submitting your loan correctly. As a base, yeah, it's a little loosey-goosey, there's no tax returns, there's no financials, but there's still some regulatory things that have to be done for that loan to close in a timely manner. Mind you, a rehab loan is taking 15 days to close. A purchase or refi, standard debt service loan is taking 20 to 25 days. Because you're cutting down the checklist. So you have to surround yourself with very heavy transactional, functional people in your team. The power team's gotta be strong. You gotta understand your market. You gotta understand where the rates are. You gotta understand who's layering the loans. I mean, there's a lot of brokers around here. This is like broker heaven. Because, I mean, direct private lenders just don't live in Europe.
Right.
It just doesn't happen that way. Most of our offices are in Philadelphia, Connecticut, Miami, New York. They're not living in Harrisburg, New York. The third-party layer brokers, or broker bankers, I'll call them, or correspondents that are direct to the direct lender, live in these areas, which is fine. They serve a valid purpose. But if you can identify somebody that is direct to the money, it's going to save you time, a better discussion, and a quicker process. That's it. Whether it's single family to four family, 5 through 25, new construction, and it's all based on very specific questions. How many rehabs have you completed in the last 48 months? How many rentals do you own currently? How many flips have you completed in the last 48 months? How many properties have you flipped or new build as a third-party operator in the last 48 months? These are basic questions. If there's 0, that's fine. If there's 10, that's great. But you've got to be honest with who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. Because it's all going to bleed through in the pricing. It's going to all bleed through on the closing of the loan. And the leverage. I mean, we can go up to 90% loan to cost on purchase, 90% on construction. I hope we can. Yeah. And then when I met you guys, when you guys were starting at Hyson and Phillips, I'm the 8th myself, so they came to me when they were on Hyson and Phillips. So I've seen a lot of companies coming up. I've seen a lot of investors coming up. I mean, I've known Dave since the Ponzi era of
That's true.
I know, we go back 17, 18 years. That's how far back that Dave and I know each other. So what I'm saying is you're gonna see a lot of people in your process of success and failures. Today, right now, you need an asset-based lender in your book. So, you need a hard money lender, a couple of them in your bullpen. You need a traditional lender, also in your bullpen, because where are your deposits going? Where are your lines of credit being lent? Okay? You're gonna leverage several real estate agents, they're gonna become the real estate agents. So you gotta build your team, keep rebuilding your team, expanding your team, and identify what neighborhood you want to be, what's your market, understand your numbers, understand your market rents compared to Section 8 numbers, understand your values, and understand construction costs. Okay, pricing is easy. That's all easy stuff if you understand the deal. And anybody here that's interested in any form of worksheets that better pencil your deals down, I'll provide you a maximum allowable offer worksheet, a cash flow worksheet, debt service coverage ratio worksheet. I'm also going to give you a rehab construction budget with a draw schedule. So you can submit that to any lender. Don't submit it just to me, you can send it to anyone you want to go with. Okay? And I'm going to send you a pricing sizer to price your own deals out, whether it's 1 through 4, residential, debt service coverage, or bridge. You'll be able to price your own loans out and see what you qualify for in the open market. So just keep that in mind. I gave all my cards out to everybody here. Just text me with the full name in your email, and I'll send you all the worksheets. And if you have any questions, you know, abstraction, discussion, whether you want to work with me or wherever else you want to work with, it doesn't matter. I just want you to be a better take care of real estate.
Thanks. Joe's a really good resource. Like you said, we've known each other for a long, long time. What's that? Yeah.
One last note, I am certified now in being a CE instructor in asset-based lending nationwide. Real estate agents as of March 1st, 2 or 3 credits toward their credits in CE in understanding and navigating asset-based lending.
Yeah. Maybe we should tap you for a course here.
Yeah.
I'd like to take some CE where I actually.
We need some broker credits.
I need to take some CE where I actually learn something. It hasn't happened recently.
Or whatever.
One of the things Joe mentioned when he was talking is seasoning. That's basically how long have you held the property before you can put new financing on it. So that's been a change with a lot of traditional lenders lately, is now they want you to have a longer hold period. Well, we don't like that as investors. You know, we have money in the deal. We want to get our money back out as fast as possible. So like any lender that has a year of seasoning, 6 months of seasoning, that's like, I'm not even talking to them. Like, I'd rather just get a year of hard money from somebody, because I want, like, I need to get at my money. Like, I can't be waiting around for it. So it's important to know multiple lenders, because depending on what's going on in the economy, those criteria change from time to time. So what'll happen, lenders that have a year of seasoning, they'll be like, oh, what happened to our business? Like, why can't we get any more refinance business? You know, and it's like, well, you guys got the seasoning. Well, eventually they'll be like, hey, we need to grow this area of the business again. Let's drop that requirement off. And then it's like, then they're back. You know, you can start using those lenders again. So now we're going to get into probably one of my favorite financing options when it comes to real estate investing, and that's buying with the financing from the seller. You always want to ask about this. However, it should never be the first question out of your mouth, because it's going to make you look like you're the newest person ever, and you just read a book or watched a video or did something and you're all excited about this. So it should not be the first question that comes out of your mouth. You have to earn the right to ask that question in your conversations with the seller. So you have to establish that you are credible and that you can close in any number of ways before you ask if seller financing is an option. Otherwise, you're going to blow a hole in your credibility right away. Particularly if you do it to an agent on a listed property, which seems to happen all the time now. So it's typically not an option in the MLS, because the listing agent has to understand this concept well enough to communicate it to their seller, and also you need to explain to the listing agent how they're going to get paid if the seller doesn't get all their money right at the time of settlement. And you probably should pay the person, the listing agent, so that they understand, hey, I know I'm going to get my commission when this deal settles because you've helped me get what it is that I want. So I did pitch this, not successfully the other day, but it wasn't my fault entirely, to a listed property, because I knew the agent on the other side would understand where we were coming from, and I presented it well. However, the seller wasn't in a position to be able to do it. They needed the cash out. But, you know, my client asked me about trying it, and I was like, you know what? We're gonna give this a shot. Because, you know, why not? But typically that's not an option. It's few and far between the realtors that even understand investing. That's why I'm happy that there's more agents coming to these types of things, but then that also understand seller financing and are willing to pitch it to their client. It's just, we're not operating at that level in general around here. So if it's in the MLS and it doesn't have seller financing as an option in the MLS, which very few do, probably don't waste your time pitching it. But if it's an off-market deal, probably the exact opposite is true. As long as the seller doesn't have a need for the cash right now, there's probably a decent opportunity that seller financing might actually be a better option for the seller than being cashed out right now. And that's usually how I pitch it. terms are fully negotiable. It's just you and the seller. There's no bank. You're coming up with it as you go. And it can be a strategy for paying more than you normally would. So if the property is too expensive, it doesn't make sense to pay cash for it. It doesn't make sense to go get a loan on it. If the seller is going to finance it, it might make the deal make sense. And you want to sell in terms of payments, just like you're a car salesman. You're selling in terms of payment, not interest. You don't bring up the interest rate. What you ask the seller what they would be comfortable, what makes sense for you to get monthly to do this deal over the next 5 years. And you just arrive at a number. Now keep in mind, you're going to have to pay them some kind of an interest rate. Oh, where's Darren? I thought he was going to call me out on that. The interest rate can't be zero. There's a minimum interest rate that you have to pay, but we can cross that bridge when you get into the deal, because otherwise it's like it looks like they're skating taxes. But this is a big tax benefit to sellers, because if they sell a fully depreciated property, they're gonna get a big tax hit. But if they sell it to you on seller financing and they can break that tax hit up over time, it can lessen the blow of that. So it is a benefit to the seller. And it doesn't, the best thing is it doesn't require you to have any type of credit or go to a bank and give them your firstborn son. And it doesn't show up in your credit report. That's another great thing. You could have 10 properties with seller financing and it's not on your credit report at all. So, and then we come to the best part. This is your retirement planning. At some point in your game, you'll get to sell with seller financing yourself. For the reasons I just discussed, that it would be benefit to your sellers, it's a benefit to you as well. You get to basically be the bank. So now, instead of selling a property for $100,000, you're selling it for $100,000 on a 30-year mortgage. So you're getting a couple years of just straight interest, plus your $100,000 principal. So you're making money on the asset that you have, in addition to just the sale price of it, and you're not getting cracked with the tax hit right away. We talked all about that. The other cool part about selling on seller financing is you don't really have to give up the income from the property. You just give up the tenants, the maintenance, and every bad part associated with owning real estate, and you just get the check, which is good as long as the person that you've seller financed it to manages the property effectively and doesn't mess it up. But typically that's not the case, but they will at some point cash you out, so you want to be prepared for that scenario, or put prepayment penalties in so that they don't cash you out too quick. Does anybody have any questions about seller financing or on selling with seller financing? Go ahead.
What term do you usually cash out on? Like 4 years?
I like to write stuff for like 5 with some kind of a balloon payment, because usually I found, like, if I'm buying stuff and the person's in a retirement mode, they're not interested in 15 years, 10 years, something like that. So even if I have an AM that's 25 years, 15 or 20, I'm still putting a balloon of 5 years. I'll go for 10 if I can get it, but really I'm probably gonna cash them out sooner than that. Because 10-year balloon is not really necessary, because at that point in time you've accumulated so much equity, you're probably gonna wanna refinance them just to tap into that well within that time period. But I don't want to have to cash them out less than 5 years. But if push comes to shove, like I know if they really want to sell right now they aren't interested in doing the seller financing, and I can say, hey, will you do 2 years? I would still put that in place with a real short one, just to get the deal, you know.
You usually require like that deposit.
You mean like if I'm selling on seller financing? I haven't sold on seller financing. Everything I'm doing is buying. Brandon, what if you're selling something on seller financing, what types of things do you typically require of a person?
If I'm selling something that's ours,
Yeah, if you're selling and you're holding paper on it.
I pretty much treat it the same as a holding loan. You know, so I mean, there's an interest, I mean, we just sell it today, we sell it financing on. It's treated basically the same as a holding loan. If it's a longer term, it's probably out there with better interest rate spread. But if it's just a short term, you know, it's basically the same as holding loan.
Okay. So it really doesn't make a difference if you own the property or if it's something they're buying.
It
It's
does a little bit, I mean, but if it's a short period, if I'm just a bridge between the loan and, you know, then getting to the bank, then it's gonna be like a holding loan. If it's gonna be something longer term, you know, I'm gonna do it, you know, 10% or something like that, or, you know, 8%, depending on, you know, the deal, with the, you know, because seller financing has gotta work both ways, it's gotta work for the seller and the buyer, so, if, you know, if I like the deal and I, you know, I know that these guys, you know, guys and girls can't make a payment because my deal sucks.
right.
If they're not gonna be successful with it, well, then the deal doesn't work. The deal has to work for them as well, so if it doesn't work for the, you know, the buyer, then there's the deal. So that's where you play with interest rates and fees and things like that to make that deal work, or, you know, add money to the end of that deal.
Right.
So when they come and do get from the bank, then you gave them what they needed up front, but you get, you know, some gravy in the back. So,
Yeah, that is one thing. I like to stretch the AMs out to keep the payments down. Then the lender's getting a lot of interest, but then I have to balloon them because, you know, I want to get, like, you don't want a 25-year or 30-year AM. They don't want that. They want to get paid out quick. So, but that can get the payments into a manageable level while you're getting the property stabilized. Any questions about seller financing? Go ahead.
You said about the zero interest. I have a seller finance loan at zero interest right now. You just go up the purchase price up. Elderly gentleman didn't want to pay income tax on the interest, so we brought down zero.
Just keep it quiet. No, I've done. I remember this one property. I came in with no interest because this was my pitch. I expected to get a counter. So I hit him with a price and I didn't mention interest. It was just payments. I think I might have even said no interest for the first 5 years or whatever. And I expected him to counter on both things. And they were like, that sounds good. And I'm like, shit, why didn't I offer him less? You know? But it ended up, you know, being a really good deal that way. But that's how I found out. I was telling that story, and Darren was like, "Oh, you know, you can't do that." And right? I don't know. I don't know if the problem is yours. I think the problem is the sellers, right?
the problem with calling the seller is everyone's skirting it. But
Right.
if it was a horse, you know, by the person selling the deal, the person would say maybe they would take advantage of it, you know, like dealing with general.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, the family member come in and say, hey, you put the name of my dad, you know, blah, blah, blah. So it's just always better to offer that interest rate to keep your head above water, because, you know, you're already gonna, you don't want to get your, you don't want to get in the ring here just because, you know, you're trying to make the best deal for yourself, you know. You gotta keep it, you know, client bill.
Plus the argument, if they say, oh, you took advantage of him, you could be like, no, we didn't. We were going to offer him 60 cents on the dollar, and he took this, you know? Right. Well, and it's honestly, like, if the interest rate is low and you're not collecting a lot of it, it's almost more of a pain in the ass for people to file that than it is worth collecting the interest, you know? So I can totally understand where they're coming from. if you're not like in the business of doing a whole bunch of seller financing and you have all this interest coming in, you're accounting for it, like if you just have a social security check coming in, who wants to deal with that for $2,000 a year, you know, whatever the interest is. Well, that's all I got for content.